Welcome back. Before going for the break, we were discussing the operating principles of a warehouse. There are certain principles that needs to be followed, that needs to be considered when we operate a warehouse. And what are these principles? What are these areas? One is the design of the warehouse. Number 2, the handling, and number 3, let us write it once again, the design, the handling technology or handling system, and number 3, the storage plan of the warehouse. What is the storage plan that the warehouse has? Within the design criteria, what we are going to discuss is A, the number of stories, number B, the height utilization, and the product movement. Within the design criteria, these are the 3 areas that needs consideration: number of stories, the height that we are going to use, and the product movement. Let us go to the slide and see what it is all about. An ideal warehouse design is limited to a single story, so the product does not have to be moved up and down. Use of elevators move product from one floor to the other. It consumes time, it consumes energy. The elevator is sometimes a hurdle, is a problem, is a bottleneck in product flow, because the warehouses may have limited elevators. It is always not possible, particularly in central business districts where lands is restricted or expensive. Warehouses should be limited to a single story. Now, this we are talking of warehouses, an ideal situation of having one story, so that the product is not moved from one story to the other. But keep yourself flexible, keep in mind that the concept and the functions of the warehouse is changing, and we will study that in future, and how warehouses now are in a position to utilize more and more heights. Let us go back to the slide again and we will understand how. Regardless of the facility size, the design should maximize the usage of available cubic space. If you remember, before going for a break, we did mention that the principle of optimum usage of a warehouse is to use its 3-dimensional space and not only the 2-dimensional floor space. We have to optimize the usage of the warehouse, which should increase the length, breadth, and the height of the warehouse. Most warehouses have 20 to 30 feet ceiling. Although modern automated and high-rise facilities can effectively use ceiling heights up to 100 feet. Through the usage of racking or other hardware, it should be possible to store products up to the building ceiling. Maximum effective warehouse height is limited by the safe lifting capabilities of material handling equipment such as forklifts. So, if you see, we are talking of height utilization. So, standard warehouses generally, traditionally, they use one story warehouse with 20 to 30 feet maximum the height. But if you see modern warehouses, see the warehouses used by FedEx, by Amazon and some leading service providers, logistics companies, manufacturing companies, distribution centers, primarily in USA, in Europe, in Australia, and of course, now in India, China of course, they have warehouses which has multiple floors, which go up to an extent of 80 to 100 feet in height, and very modern picking material handling equipments are used, very modern picking process are used, whereas items can be stored or retrieved from several heights. Very modern equipments which are safe, because you have to understand, and we are going to touch base this particular issue as well. One of the criteria of operating a warehouse is safety as well. While warehouses to the extent of 70 or 80 or 100 feet are being used, it is essential, and while being used through modern material handling equipments, safety measures are extremely important, extremely critical. So, this is what we were referring to, the height utilization, right. Let us go to the next slide. So, we have mentioned about the number of stories, number of floors, we have mentioned about the height utilization. Now, in the next slide we are going to talk about the product movement. How does it fall under designing of a warehouse? Warehouse design should be such which should allow for straight product flow through the facility, whether items are stored or not stored. What does it mean? Product should be received at one end of the building, stored in the middle and then shipped from the other end. Straight line product flow minimizes congestion and confusion. So, in one of the, before going for break, I think we mentioned that there is an inbound product, there is storage. So, the product may go into storage, and when required it will move out of the warehouse. Even if the product is not stored, the warehouse may be utilized as a cross dock, then the product will not be stored and it will move out of the warehouse, and the straighter the movement is, the better. The movement should not follow a cycle or a flow which is not straight. Let us see the next slide. We spoke of design, and now we are going to talk of the handling technology. So, the first operating principle has been discussed, that is how designing a product. Within design, number of stories, height utilization and product movement. Now, we are going to discuss the next operating principle, which includes the handling methodology within the warehouse. Within handling, we are going to refer to two important areas: A, continuity in movement, continuity without breakage, without stoppage, and number B is economies of scale in handling. continuity and movement scale economics. Let us go and see the slide that describes this continuity and economies of scale. What do we mean by movement continuity? And as always, we are going to refer to some very important words or phrases in this particular slide. Let us go and see the slide. Movement continuity means it is better for a material handler or piece of handling equipment to make a longer move, reduce number of handlers, not make numerous individual short segment of the same move. That means a long stretch move without involving too many handlers, without having too many breakages, too many stops in between. So, one point to the other, there has to be a continuous movement. Exchanging the product between handlers or moving it in one piece of equipment to another wastes time and increase the potential of damage. Fewer longer movement in the warehouse are preferred. Fewer and longer movement in the warehouse is always desirable. We do not want too many handlers, too many individuals involved in moving the same shipment within the warehouse. At the same time, it is not desirable for many handling equipments to move the same shipment within the warehouse. The lesser the number of handlers and the equipments moving that particular equipment, the better. So, this is what we call as movement continuity, continuous without stoppages, right. Let us go to the next part, which we are talking of, economies of scale in movement. We all know what economies of scale is all about. In production, by economies of scale, I think by this time you all know what is economies of scale. All companies have certain fixed cost to operate a plant or a production house. So, every product that is produced has a certain cost. Now, fixed costs are fixed, they remain where they are. If we increase our production, cost per unit, cost of production per unit is going to come down. Here the same logic applies in movement of goods or shipments within a warehouse. More the number of shipments moved by a particular material handling machine, the more we are applying economies of scale. Fewer the shipments moved by a particular machine, lesser is the economies of scale we are applying in a warehouse. Let us go to the slide and see the actual definition and actual description. All warehouse activities should handle or move the largest quantities possible. Instead of moving individual cases, warehouses should be designed, or activities within the warehouse should be designed to move groups of such shipment or groups of such cases. And when we say cases, it can be a pallet, it can be a container. So, rather than one material machine, handling machine, handling 2 crates, if it is in a position, it should move 10 crates at a time. This batching or grouping would imply that multiple products or order must be moved or selected at the same time. This is a complexity we have to overcome this challenge. While this might increase the complexity of an individual's activity, because if we have to move in batches, that means multiple products or order must be moved at the same time. So, we have to select multiple orders at the same time in order to move them at one go at the same time. The principle reduces the number of activities and the resulting cost. So, now you see what we mean by movement scale economies. Moving, rather than moving one pallet or one container, our activity should involve moving multiple pallets or multiple containers or multiple cartons, multiple crates. Now, where would this multiple crates come from? It may come from a single order, or we should consolidate orders. So, in order to satisfy, in order to ensure economies of scale, economies in movement, we should be able to bear this complexity of selecting different orders to be moved at the same time. This is something that needs to be done, which should ensure that I can move several and multiple batches, multiple containers, crates at the same time, rather than moving one at a time, which is going to make the system very slow, which will not be effective, because you are using a material handling equipment multiple times. Why should you do that? Because every time you handle a machine, it incurs a certain cost, it reduces its lifetime, its lifespan, it needs more and more maintenance. So, all these things put together, movement scale economy is extremely essential. So, under operating principles, we have just discussed the design criteria, we have discussed the handling technology and the methods that should be used, how fast, multiple items, etc. Now, we have to discuss, we are going to discuss the storage plan. What is the plan of storages? How the company has designed its storage plan is one of the operating principles of a particular warehouse. It depends, I am going to utilize my warehouse depending upon the company's storage plan. Let us go to the slide and see what does it mean. A warehouse design should consider product characteristics, the type of product, is it bulk, is it perishable, is it fragile, is it hard, is it heavy, is it voluminous. So, all types of product categories needs to be considered. 1. The product volume is a major concern. Why? Obvious reasons. We are talking of utilizing the length, breadth and height. So, the volume would determine how much space a particular shipment or a group of shipment would occupy my warehouse. High volume sales or throughput products should be stored in a location that minimize the distance it is moved. It should be close. That means items which are high in demand, which moves very frequently, daily, a number of times in a particular day. We cannot afford to store these items at remote locations. We cannot afford to store these items out of our reach, at a height which needs, where the retrieval is time consuming. because if you do that, if you store such frequently moved items close and within reach at low storage racks near the primary aisles, the need for extended lifting goes down significantly. Conversely, items low volume can be assigned that are distant from primary aisles or higher up in storage racks. So, when you say storage plan, what are we storing? We are storing goods, fair enough. The different types of goods, different categories of products, fragile, non-fragile, perishable, non-perishable, components, finished goods, heavy items, voluminous items, smaller items, delicate items, whatever it may be. We have to also consider items that move very quickly, very frequently, where the market demand is very high and every day the product needs to be moved from the warehouse to the market. We need to store them very close to us so that the picking becomes easier. We also have to consider items which are not so frequently used, which are not required every now and then, can be stored at a place, and we have seen that in our house as well, right. I did mention in one of the sessions that our kitchen is a very good example of a small modular supply chain process, where items are stored, they are marked, inventory management is done, stock is kept, safety stock is kept, right. We have seen in our house also things that we need for a day to day basis are kept at a place which are easily accessible to us. Same applies in warehouses, where items that needs frequent movement should be kept at a place where it can be easily retrieved or picked, contrary to items which are not required for a longer period of time. We do not keep winter clothes close to us in Hyderabad because they are required once in a year. So, they are probably kept in a loft or away, just to give you a fair idea. So, that is the reason I am bringing the similarity or comparison. The next slide will show you a sample storage area. You need not go by this as the standard storage area. It is just a sample. As I said, storage principle documents vary from company to company, vary from warehouse to warehouse. So, a storage area for a particular company will be different from another company, depending upon the product they move, different types of the frequency of the movement, difference of the material handling carried out in the storage area. The next slide also tells you the storage plan. The plan should include a specific strategy for products dependent on weight and storage characteristics. Heavy items assigned to be located ground, bulky or low density product require extensive storage volume, open flow spaces are required for them. Smaller items may require storage shelves or drawers. Integrated storage plan must consider and address the specific characteristics of each product. When we say integrated storage plan, we are talking of, there are different types of products. There are bulky items which need not be kept on shelves, which can be stacked on pallets on the floor. So, these are storage plan for different products, different categories of product. So, we have already discussed the contracted warehouse and the private warehouse, and we are not going to the next very critical issue in a warehouse is selecting the site for the warehouse, the location where the warehouse is going to be set up. Again, it depends upon what is a particular company's requirement. A site selection depends upon a number of variables, a number of factors. By site we mean the location where the warehouse has to be constructed. So, let us go and see what we mean by site selection. Location analysis techniques are available, location analysis techniques, and that is something we are going to discuss when we discuss network planning. Once location analysis is completed, so what are the areas that needs consideration when you select a site for a warehouse? Three things. A, it could be a commercial zone. B, outlying areas served by motor truck only. Central or downtown areas. So, three are the three options that companies generally consider to establish or select their site for the warehouse. The primary factors in site selection are the availability of services and cost, the cost of procurement. So, I would select a site for my warehouse depending upon the kind of product I have for storage, whether I have the available services for that particular product in that area, in that location, whether infrastructure is available, whether that warehouse is connected to other parts of the country by roadways or railways, etc. Establishing a warehouse require significant investment in terms of money. So, cost of the warehouse, cost per cubic feet, cost of the land is extremely critical to decide whether a particular site should be considered or not. There are other factors for site selection which can be described in the next slide. A warehouse need not be located in major industrial area. In many cities, one observes warehouses among industrial plants in areas zoned for light or heavy industry. Interesting, this is not legal necessity because most warehouses operate under restrictions. It need not be located in major industrial area. Somebody can compromise or can trade off between price and the location of his warehouse. He can go away, he can build a bigger place which may be a little away from the commercial area or the industrial area, and he can connect his warehouse to the industrial area through proper transportation system. Beyond procurement costs, setup and operating expenses, rail sidings, utility expenses and highway expenses. Setup and operating expenses such as rail sidings, utility expenses, taxes, insurance rates and highway access also require evaluation. When we evaluate whether a particular site is appropriate for my warehouse, it is not only the procurement cost, the initial cost, the buying cost of the warehouse. We should also see how much it would cost me to set up the warehouse, how much would be my day to day expenses, operating cost? What would be utility expenses? How much taxes or insurance I am liable to pay in that particular location? And these expenses vary from location to location in our country, from city to city, from state to state. We have given an example. A food distribution firm recently rejected what otherwise appeared to be a totally satisfactory site because of the insurance rates. The site was located near the end of a water main. Now that place, a food processing unit, it rejected a site. That particular site, it covered all the necessities, right? But it was rejected because it was susceptible to accident. It was susceptible to, since it was a food processing plant, it was located at the end of a water main. That would mean the food could have been damaged. That means they would have had to insure the goods at a very high premium, because there was a possibility of damage if food was kept in that particular warehouse. So that one criteria, just one criteria, despite all the criteria being in favor of the warehouse, since the insurance factor, just the insurance factor was so critical that the company decided against a particular location or site. So if you see, there are so many criteria in selection of a site, the company has to very wisely decide and evaluate all the criteria. What are the other parameters of site selection? Let us see. So there are a number of them. Adequate water supplies, water problems, demand of water, electricity, power, adequate room for expansion, required utilities, the soil capable of supporting the structure, having proper drainage system. All these contribute to the decision whether a particular site needs to be selected or rejected. Is there a continuous flow of water, if that is an important resource? Is continuous power available? Is the soil, is the ground strong enough to bear the weight of the structure in case of earthquake, in case of any natural calamity? Is there a possibility that the soil may not be hard or strong enough to bear the weight of the structure and the structure may fall off? So you see, there are so many parameters which needs to be considered while selecting a particular site for a warehouse, right? Now let us go to another very important area, is the warehouse layout or the warehouse design, the internal layout of a particular warehouse. Let us go and see the slide. Layout depends upon the proposed material handling system, whether am I using manual equipments run by laborers, am I using very sophisticated and automated machines, am I using pallets, am I using racks for storage, what is the size of the pallet, is it standardized? So the internal structure, internal architecture of the warehouse will depend upon primarily how the material handling equipment moves within the warehouse. What is the material picking system? What is the material storage and picking system in the warehouse? This is one of the most critical area which determines the layout of the warehouse. In an extended warehouse management course, you will learn how different picking system, there are different, as I said, not two warehouses are similar. There are different picking system within a warehouse. There are different kinds of picking or storing material handling system are used in a warehouse. So, within the warehouse, we are going to discuss what would be the internal structure depending upon how picking is done within the warehouse. We are going to discuss a little more about warehouse management, some important areas, some other critical areas that needs consideration, that needs study, that needs discussion under warehouse management. We are going to discuss how a warehouse should be prevented from pilferage, how strong security system should be within the warehouse. So these are very critical issues that are going to be discussed in the next class, which is Saturday. Till such time, thank you very much, and I see you again on Saturday. Thank you. Have a nice time.